What if Tatsumaki was Deku's mother? Chapter 2. Deku landed at UA, ready for his second day. A smile spread across his face as he walked up to the massive building. "Man, this place is really cool," said Deku. Deku walked inside and came across the Class 1A door. Coming the other way was Mina Ashido. Deku raised his hand to greet her. "Morning, Ashido," said Deku. There was silence for a second, then Ashido responded. "Yeah, morning, Midoriya," she said. Deku stood for a second confused about the cold welcome, but didn't think too hard about it. He reached out for the door handle, but his hand accidentally brushed against Ashido's, as she was also going to open the door. Like she had just been hit by lightning, Deku and Ashido's nervous system went haywire. The two stood frozen for a second before speaking at the same time. What the hell did you do?" "Me? I didn't do anything," they both said at the same time. Ashido threw open the door and walked over to her seat. "Geez, Midoriya, what did you do?" said Kaminari. Deku shrugged, taking his seat. A few minutes passed, and then the door was thrown open again. Suddenly, All Might rushed in his Silver Age suit. "Good morning, students. Are we all ready for an exciting day?" said All Might. The class cheered. "Ah, very good. Now please put on your hero costumes and meet me at Site Gamma," said All Might. The class nodded. 10 minutes later, the class was gathered in front of All Might. "Ah, wonderful. You all look like very promising heroes. Now, today's lesson will be combat training," said All Might. "Will we be fighting robots again?" asked Kaminari. "Ah, no, my boy. This will be a 2v2 match against your classmates. One team will be the villains and the other will be the heroes. The heroes need to capture the bomb or the villains, and the villains need to capture the heroes or prevent the heroes from capturing the bomb," said All Might. The class nodded, excited for their lesson. "Good. The first hero team will be Midoriya and Uraraka," said All Might. "Ah, sweet, we're on the same team together, Deku," said Uraraka, excited. "Yeah, that's awesome," said Deku. "And the first villain team will be Bakugo and Ida," said All Might. Deku smiled over to Bakugo, who smiled back. It's been a while since their last fight, so it would be good to see how much they've grown. "Okay, villains, go set up. I'll send the heroes in 5 minutes," said All Might. Deku walked over to Deku. "I'm gonna kick your ass," said Bakugo. "I'd like to see you try, man," said Deku. The two fist bumped and Bakugo walked off. Deku walked over to Uraraka, who was doing some stretches. "Any ideas?" said Uraraka. Kachan will attack me straight away. He will attack fast and hard, knowing that if I can't focus, I can't attack him back," said Deku. "How do you plan to get in? You can climb the fire escape if you want," said Uraraka. Deku looked at her confused. "Did you forget I can fly?" asked Deku. All Might sounded the klaxon and Deku floated into the air. He waved his hand and picked up Uraraka. They quickly flew on top of the building, landing on the roof. "They won't expect this. It's not my usual style," said Deku. Deku opened the door and walked inside. As he turned the corner, his eyes went wide with shock as Bakugo's palm was inches from his face. Ah, shit. Deku was cut off when Bakugo blasted him straight in the face. Just in time, Deku managed to wrap himself in his aura, but he was still thrown into the wall. "I knew you'd try something sneaky," said Bakugo. Bakugo jumped forward towards Deku, who was lying against the wall. "Jesus, you didn't hold back at all," said Deku. Deku saw Bakugo approaching and quickly formed a barrier in front of him. Bakugo's fist bashed into it angrily. "My turn," said Deku. Deku thrust his arm forward, pushing Bakugo down the corridor. He hit the wall with a thud, but quickly got back to his feet. "Uraraka, get down!" Deku yelled. Uraraka jumped to the floor, and Deku closed his eyes and crossed his arms. "What are you doing?" asked Bakugo. Bakugo looked around him and saw the wall was starting to glow. "Oh no," said Bakugo. Deku suddenly opened his arms with a scream. The walls shook for a second and then were torn apart. The entire top floor of the building was torn apart and lifted into the air. The students now stood on the new roof, looking at each other. "Uraraka, get down the stairs. I'll handle Kachan," said Deku. Uraraka ran up the stairs, but Bakugo wasn't going to let her leave. He blasted towards her, intent on knocking her out in one attack. However, just before impact, several bricks whizzed past his head. Instinctively, Bakugo pulled back, letting Uraraka escape. Good plan. You know I have the advantage in tight areas, so you opened it up a bit, said Bakugo. Deku smirked. You want to get serious now? Asked Deku. Yeah, it's time, said Bakugo. Bakugo blasted towards Deku, aiming to an explosion at his face. As his friend approached, Deku held out his hand, forming a bubble around him. Bakugo's blast smashed into the side, but didn't even reach Deku. Smirking, Deku's eyes glowed green as he brought his hand quickly down in a chopping motion. Quickly, Bakugo looked up, seeing all the pieces of building hurtling towards him. Are you crazy, Deku? Asked Bakugo. Don't worry, you'll be fine, said Deku. Bakugo dug in his feet and aimed his gauntlet straight up. Bakugo went to pull the trigger, but then his gauntlet slipped off his hand. Bakugo went to grab it, but he moved away through the air. Bakugo looked at Deku in shock. Deku's eyes were glowing bright, and with a small movement, he pointed straight up, reminding Bakugo of the oncoming rocks. Bakugo started to panic for the first time in a while. Bakugo got ready to use a massive blast. He knew that he could make a big enough blast to destroy all the rocks, but he also knew his arm could break from the recoil. He gritted his teeth, but just before he fired, he heard a click from behind him. He turned, seeing the firing ping on his gauntlets activating. Time slowed down. Bakugo knew that he had to dodge that to stand a chance of winning. Quickly, Bakugo blasted himself into the air. As he flipped back, he saw the oncoming rocks. Mid-air, he pointed one hand towards the rocks and one hand towards the building. The flames from the previous explosions were still around, so he needed to maintain his position. With a yell, Bakugo let out two gigantic explosions. One tore through the falling rocks, and the other headed straight for the roof of the building. Perfect, said Deku. Deku flicked his hand, covering the roof in energy. The shockwave hit the roof, but then was reflected straight back up, hitting Bakugo in the chest. Bakugo's body was covered in flames, then dropped to the ground. Deku slowly lowered himself down, walking over to Bakugo. He laid on the ground, panting and coughing. When did you get so strong? Asked Bakugo. Deku knelt down next to his friend. I'm gonna need you to give up, said Deku. Never, said Bakugo. Deku sighed, standing up. Fine, your choice, said Deku. Deku flicked his wrist, flicking Bakugo into the wall. Bakugo was instantly knocked out. Alright, you might want to get him to recovery girl, said Deku. Uraraka and Ida heard this over the communicator and looked up to the roof in shock. That was so quick, said Uraraka. Ida took a deep breath, knowing that Deku was on his way and would be down soon enough. I need to move the bomb away from here, said Ida. Ida went to grab the bomb when he heard a tapping from behind. He turned and saw Deku floating outside the window behind him, tapping on the window. Don't worry, I'll let myself in, said Deku. Deku flicked his hand, pulling the wall off the building, and then stepped through the newly made hole. Deku smiled over at Uraraka, who was looking at him in shock. She gulped as Deku's feet landed on the ground. He's incredible, said Uraraka in shock. Ida, surrender. You can't beat both of us, said Deku. But I can slow you down. Ida was cut off when Deku's eyes began to glow, and he was pinned against the wall. As if it was easy, Deku walked over to the bomb and placed his outstretched hand on it, while still holding Ida in place. This was fun, said Deku. Deku put his hand on the bomb, ending the fight. Deku lowered his other hand, releasing Ida, and walked over to Uraraka. Good job keeping him busy. I'm not sure if I could beat him both of them at once, said Deku. Deku walked off, leaving the entire class speechless. Even Todoroki, who was very confident in his own power, stared in shock at the screen. Could I actually beat him? Todoroki asked. Deku got home and jumped onto the sofa. The fight with Bakugo really took some energy out of him. He had gone to see Bakugo in the infirmary after their fight. Deku thought back to their conversation. Hey man, you okay? Deku asked. Bakugo was wrapped in bandages, and his arms were in casts. I'll be fine, said Bakugo. When did you get so strong? Deku laughed, putting his hand on behind his neck. Oh, I did some training here and there with that mum-tabby do, said Deku. Wow, it was effective. It could barely touch you. Usually a big blast is enough to break your barrier, but it did nothing, said Bakugo. Bakugo leaned back in his bed. Looks like it's my turn to catch up with you, Deku, said Bakugo. Deku smiled, putting his hand on Bakugo's shoulder. Oh, it hasn't been my turn in years, Sakura-chan, said Deku. Oh, don't get cocky, said Bakugo. The two boys laughed. Deku sat at home smiling. Bakugo could be an ass sometimes, but he was a good friend. The next few weeks were uneventful until it was time for the class to go to the USJ. The massive domed building truly was impressive, and the entire class was in shock at it. Please, come inside, said 13. The class walked inside, seeing gigantic arenas. There was a flaming city, a stranded boat, and mountains. Deku's eyes widened as he kept seeing new areas. Oh, this is going to be amazing, said Deku. 13 and Aizawa began explaining the day, but Deku's eyes began to wander, looking at the different areas. His eyes finally landed somewhere, ending up at the centre of the main area. There, directly in the middle, was a black cloud. Mr. Aizawa? What's that? Asked Deku. Midoriya, don't interrupt me when I'm... Aizawa stopped talking when he looked where Deku was pointing. Neither he or 13 had ever seen that before. Suddenly the cloud expanded massively and hordes of people began pouring out. Aizawa's eyes went wide. Those are villains. 13, protect the students, yelled Aizawa. The class turned and began to head for the exit, but they were cut off by Kurogiri. Oh, sorry to barge in, said Kurogiri. 13 tried to use her quirk on Kurogiri, but he reflected it back on her. I can't let any of you leave just yet. You need to meet all my friends first, said Kurogiri. The villain expanded his cloud body, covering the students, but before he could teleport them, he got pushed back. What the? Asked Kurogiri. Deku held out his hand, his entire body glowing with power, his eye and his feet lifting off the ground slowly. Slowly, Deku compressed all the cloud back towards Kurogiri, until he regained his humanoid shape. Deku pinned him to the wall, slowly increasing the pressure. He's strong, said Kurogiri. Ida, you're the fastest. Go get help now, said Deku. Ida nodded immediately, taking off at max speed. Shigaraki looked at what was happening from the main area and sighed. Pathetic Kurogiri. Defeated by a child. Nomu, go get him, said Shigaraki. Suddenly the massive Nomu that stood next to Shigaraki shot forwards and tore past Aizawa and up the stairs. Aizawa stared after it, terrified for his students. Who are you? Asked Deku. Deku pressed on the villain, trying to get information. I'll never talk, brat, said Kurogiri. Oh, you'll talk. You'll just take. Deku was cut off when the Nomu backhanded him across the back of the head. Deku was launched all the way across the arena and crashed into the top of one of the mountains. Deku! Yelled Bakugo. Bakugo launched the Nomu, firing blasts straight into his eyes, but the massive beast didn't even notice. He grabbed Bakugo and threw him to the ground. Get back! Yelled Ashido. Bakugo nodded, getting out of the way as Ashido charged at the Nomu. Using One for All, she jumped high in the air before pirouetting in the air and landing on the Nomu's back. She wrapped her hands around the villain's neck and produced as much acid as she could. For a second, the Nomu froze, and then reached up behind its head and grabbed Ashido by the face. A couple of other class members jumped in to help Ashido, but they were battered away by Ashido's flailing body. Enough of this, she growled. Ashido's body began glowing a bright pink. She reached up, grabbing the Nomu's arm, and then melted through it, freeing her. She and the severed arm fell to the ground. Ashido jumped to her feet, then shot forward. As she ran, she wrapped her full power acid around her fist. One for all, 100%, yelled Ashido. Ashido's acid had become much stronger since she'd got One for All, and it became even stronger the more of One For All she used. However, even her body couldn't handle the strength of One For All 100% acid. Ashido winced at the pain as she felt her hand beginning to dissolve. "Smash!" she yelled. She sprinted up to the Nomu and punched him straight in the gut. With the extra power of the acid, it allowed her to punch straight through the villain. The monster stood impaled on Ashido's broken arm. The entire class was in shock from what they saw, but it wasn't over. Suddenly, Nomu's severed arm began to regrow and grabbed Ashido by the throat. The monster lifted her up, which pulled her broken arm out of the gaping wound. Ashido screamed, howling in pain at having her arm mangled in such a horrid way. Nomu gripped tighter, and Ashido fell out of One For All 100%. As she lost consciousness, Ashido could hear the rest of her class screaming and attacking the beast, but nothing was working. "Clear the way," said Todoroki. The other students moved out the way as Todoroki stamped his foot, unleashing a massive torrent of ice. It slammed into the monster, and thick icicles impaled its chest. As the monster began to freeze, it threw Ashido down the massive steps. Her barely conscious body smashed into the ground below. Just for a second, this broke Todoroki's concentration, and that was all Nomu needed. It smashed the ice, impaling its chest, and pushed the ice out of his back. The class watched in shock as the massive wounds healed themselves in a couple of seconds. Did you forget about dear old me?" said Kurogiri. The entire class felt a chill run up their back. Suddenly they were surrounded with thick cloud and were teleported all around the USJ. "Do you see that eraser head? All of your pathetic students are going to die today," said Shigaraki. Aizawa ran over to Ashido, who was unconscious on the ground. Her arm was badly broken, and she was bleeding a lot from a head wound. Aizawa pulled out a bandage, quickly wrapping it around her head. "Pretty dumb, showing your back to an enemy," said Shigaraki. Shigaraki ran over, his hand outstretched. Just before contact, though, Aizawa jumped to the side whilst holding Ashido in his arm. "Can I win? I can't fight when I'm protecting her, and there is still that big guy." "Wait, where is he?" said Aizawa. Aizawa was cut off when Nomu appeared in front of him. "He's so fast," said Aizawa. Aizawa tried to take away his quirk, but it didn't stop Nomu from grabbing him and slamming into the ground. Aizawa winced in pain as his bones cracked. Shigaraki walked over laughing. Nomu, you can get rid of the girl. She's just getting in the way," said Shigaraki. Nomu grabbed Ashido by the broken arm and threw her across the arena. Luckily, she was still unconscious, so she didn't feel the extreme pain of being thrown or the landing. Shigaraki stood over Aizawa as he was being systematically broken by Nomu. "Good, Nomu, now his other arm," said Shigaraki. Aizawa yelled in pain as his bones were broken. Shigaraki's haunting laughter echoed throughout the entire USJ. On the other side of the USJ, someone was waking up. Deku slowly opened his eyes, only hearing the crackling laughter and his own ears ringing. Deku staggered to his feet and felt the back of his head. It was bleeding, but luckily his body had instinctively put up a barrier to protect him. If it didn't, his brains would have been splattered across the side of the USJ. Deku looked over to the side of the mountain top where he was on and could see Aizawa pinned down. I've got to help," said Deku. Deku gritted his teeth, ignoring the pain throughout his entire body, and shot down towards the ground. The mountain splintered and cracked with the force of the launch, and so did the ground upon landing. Shigaraki looked over, seeing Deku float out of the crater and quietly fly towards them. "Round 2, bird brain," said Deku. Deku held out his hand and yelled using his maximum power. His entire body glowed as he launched Nomu back. "Pathetic boy, don't interrupt me." Shigaraki was cut off when Deku flicked his hand, slamming his head into the ground. "I could kill you in 100 different ways, but I hold myself back. I have to be so careful when I fight. One wrong move and your delicate little head goes pop," said Deku. Nomu jumped forward, swinging his massive fist at Deku, but it couldn't scratch Deku's barrier. "And you, I'm not sure if you are even human, but I don't care. I'm putting you down, said Deku. Deku flicked his wrist, sending Nomu into the air. Focusing seeing all of his power, Deku grabbed hold of the villain, then slammed him back down to the ground. Deku reached to the side, grabbing the top of the mountain that he smashed into earlier. Using every drop of power he had, Deku tore off the top of it and threw it towards Nomu, crushing him. Deku stood panting, then winced in pain. He landed on the ground, grabbing his head. He was bleeding more now, and his vision was going blurry. Suddenly, Nomu shot out of the rubble, heading straight for Deku. He put up his barrier, but Nomu's fist tore straight through it, smashing straight into Deku's gut. As Deku sailed high into the air, he coughed out blood. Down on the ground, Ashido was waking up. She looked up, seeing Deku falling to the ground, and immediately jumped into action. Using One for All 5%, she sprinted over and caught Deku before he could smash into the ground. However, she soon realised that she had jumped into a dead end. Ashido turned around, seeing Nomu and Shigaraki closing in on her. I can't run. I need to fight, thought Ashido. I won't let you hurt him anymore, said Ashido. She sprinted straight at Nomu, hitting him in the face with a 100% smash, but the only one who took damage was Ashido. As her other arm fell broken to her side, Nomu punched her in the gut, sending her spiralling into the wall behind Deku. Nomu, kill the girl, said Shigaraki. Nomu launched forward, aiming to crush Ashido with his massive fist. No, you won't, said Deku. Just before Nomu's massive fist smashed into Ashido's skull into the wall, Deku jumped in the way. Using all of his remaining energy, he made the strongest barrier he could as he wrapped his arms around Ashido to shield her. However, Deku didn't have enough energy left to stop Nomu, and his barrier was shattered. Nomu's massive fist smashed into Deku's back, slamming both him and Ashido into the wall. Ashido was barely awake, but she could feel blood pouring down her neck. She opened her eyes, seeing Deku's broken body laying across her, his blood pouring out of his mouth and down her neck. Midoriya, wake up, she said. Try again, Nomu, said Shigaraki. Nomu reached forward, intent on crushing Ashido's head with his massive hand, when suddenly its fingers bent backwards, broken. Then its forearm snapped in half and began wrapping around its bicep. Ashido watched wide eyes, then she felt Deku start to move. It started as a little head twitch, but within seconds it was a full body fit. His entire body convulsed and writhed, his eyes glowing brighter and brighter with each passing second. What the hell is going on? Said Shigaraki. Nomu tried to swing his fist at Deku and Ashido when suddenly his body was slammed into the ground. The massive monster tried to get up but couldn't. Shigaraki ran over to the monster, confused about what was going on, but at that moment he did. His knees snapped backwards, forcing him to the ground. What's going on? Said Shigaraki. Ashido stared, awestruck. Glancing at Deku, she could see that each time his body convulsed, the force on Shigaraki and Nomu increased massively. However, Ashido could also see that Deku was getting more and more injured with each passing second. It's as if he's increasing gravity on them. But he won't survive if this goes on much longer, said Ashido. Using her broken arm, she grabbed Deku's face. It hurt like hell, but she needed to do this. Midoriya? Midoriya, wake up! She yelled. It didn't work. She began to cry as she could see Deku's bones break from the force he was putting out. I just can't watch you die. I've got to somehow shock him out of it. Screw it. A big shock coming up. Ashido gulped, then kissed Deku. Slowly, Deku began to slow down as Ashido dragged him back to consciousness. Just before Deku woke up, he stopped convulsing, and Ashido lifted her lips from his. Deku opened his eyes, barely conscious. What happened? Deku asked. Don't worry about it. At least you're alive, said Ashido. Not for long, said Shigaraki. Suddenly, Nomu grabbed both the young heroes and threw them across the arena. The two exhausted heroes slid across the ground, barely able to keep their eyes open. Nomu, kill both of those pathetic... Shigaraki was cut off when he heard a steady tapping coming from the glass above him. A freezing chill went up his back as he looked up, seeing the glowing silhouette of the number 3 hero staring back at him. Suddenly, Tornado flicked her wrist and tore off the entire roof of the USJ. The horrific storm of broken glass began to spin around Tornado as she slowly began to fly down to the ground. "Nomu, get her!" yelled Shigaraki. The massive monster jumped towards Tornado, but with a casual flick of her hand, she sent it hurtling back down to earth. Before the beast could recover, the Tornado pointed her finger down, firing all the pieces of jagged broken glass straight through the monster, killing it. The gooey remains of the monster fell to the ground in front of a petrified Shigaraki. The other villains, who Aizawa knocked out earlier, began waking up, seeing the glowing silhouette of the terrible Tornado floating over them. "We need to get out of here!" yelled the villains. A group of 5 villains sprinted up the stairs, heading for the door, but when they got there, they were met with the towering figure of All Might. The villains stared at All Might, then looked back, seeing the immense rage emanating off a terrible Tornado. They immediately turned to All Might and put their hands together. "Please arrest us," said the villains. Before All Might could respond, Tornado flicked her wrist and dragged the villains back down to the main area. With another flick of her wrist, she picked up all the other villains from across the USJ and gathered them all in the main area. With a cold calmness, Tornado spoke. "Did you come after my school? After my son?" asked Tornado. Tornado's face was twitching with rage. "We won't answer to you, filthy..." Shigaraki was cut off by Tornado slamming him into the ground. With a flick of her wrist, she forced all the villains to bow before her. If their body fought back, their knees instantly broke. "You should bow when you speak to me. You should be begging for your life right now. Now, is anyone going to answer my questions?" asked Tornado. Tornado tightened her fist, putting more pressure on the villains. Yes, we did," one villain spoke up. The villain pleaded through tears. "Why?" asked Tornado. "The boss, they made that creature to kill All Might. Please don't kill us," said the villain. Tornado glanced at the puddle that used to be Nomu. With a flick of her hand, she threw her over to Shigaraki. "Looks like I killed your little science experiment. You won't be given the honour of such a quick demise." Tornado tightened her grip. The sound of popping joints and breaking bones could be heard all around the USJ. Slowly, the members of Class 1A walked out, seeing the disturbing scene before them. They looked over at Deku, who was just looking at the ground, sadness written across his face. "Tornado, stop this immediately," All Might said. "I will get to you, Toshinori. First, I will deal with the slime that dared to attack my son," said Tornado. Tornado's eyes burned green. As she increased her power, the amount of light she put out was beginning to become painful to look at. "I said stop, Tatsumaki," said All Might. Tornado took a breath and slowly began to lower the pressure on the villains. "Thank you," said All Might. Tornado turned her head to the side, annoyed, and then flicked her wrist, knocking out all the villains. "Now it's your turn, Toshinori. You were supposed to be here," said Tornado, annoyed. "Mum, stop, please," said Deku. Tornado spun around, staring at Deku, her rage barely contained. "Not now, Izuku. Let me deal with this," said Tornado. "It's not All Might's fault." Tornado flicked her hand, pulling Deku towards her. She then grabbed him by the collar. "I said not now," said Tornado. Deku looked into his mother's eyes. He knew that she had a temper and could sometimes be quite cold, but she had never looked so soulless. "Please stop, Mum," said Deku. Tornado looked into her pleading eyes of her son. A mixture of fear, pain, and concern filled them. Slowly she let go of him and pulled him in for a hug. I'm sorry, Izuku. I just felt your energy fading and I freaked out," said Tornado. "It's okay, Mum," said Deku. Deku coughed up a little bit of blood and collapsed into Tornado's arms. "Quickly, get him to Recovery Girl," said All Might. Before the words had even left All Might's mouth, Tornado took off at max speed. All Might heard the distant sound of a sonic boom, then turned to see Shigaraki was missing. "Where did he go?" asked All Might. Unfortunately, with Tornado's outburst, everyone was distracted enough for Kirigiri to come and teleport him and Shigaraki away. The rest of the teachers soon arrived and took care of the villains and the students. A while later, All Might walked to the medical office. There, in one bed, slept Ashido. All Might smiled, putting his hand on her shoulder. "I'm proud of you," All Might said. "Is that you, Toshi?" asked All Might. All Might walked around the curtain, seeing Deku asleep in the other bed. Tornado was holding his hand, tears flowing down her face. "Is he okay?" asked All Might. The cavalry girl says that he had broken a lot of bones, and his left shoulder was almost completely destroyed. She's done what she can, but he might never be fully healed," said Tornado. "I'm sorry to hear that, but he's a strong kid. I'm sure he'll be fine," said All Might. All Might sat down in the chair on the other side of Deku and put his hand on Deku's. Immediately, All Might's body felt like it was hit by lightning. He looked at Deku in shock, then looked at Tornado. "Tatsumaki, what the hell was that?" asked All Might. "What are you talking about?" asked Tornado. "Don't play games with me. That felt like your power, combined with One for All," said All Might. Tornado lowered her head. "When we broke up, it was because I was scared. You had told me about One for All and All for One, and what he could do, and it frightened me," said Tornado. "But I told you about All for One and One for All years before we broke up," said All Might. "I wasn't scared for my safety. I was scared for his. I was scared for our child. I'm sorry I never told you. I know it's an awful thing to do, but I genuinely believe it was the right thing. The best way of keeping him safe," said Tornado. All Might just stood, his jaw hanging open. "Please don't hate me, Toshi. I had to do this. You said yourself being close to you is dangerous. I was fine putting myself through that danger, but not Izuku," said Tornado. All Might blinked slowly. His brain was struggling. I need some air," said All Might. All Might walked out of the room, closely followed by a crying Tornado. When the door closed, Deku's eyes opened. Shock covered his face. "Ashido, are you awake?" asked Deku. "Yes, I am," said Ashido. "Did you hear all that?" asked Deku. "Yes, I did," said Ashido. "Okay, I wasn't hallucinating," said Deku. "Neither was I," said Ashido. Deku used his power to push the curtain back so he could see Ashido. Both of them wore shocked expression. I don't even know what to say," said Deku. Deku took a deep breath, and then he remembered something. "Wait, did you kiss me?" said Deku. If Ashido wasn't already pink, Deku would be seeing her blushing like a tomato. Sort of. It didn't mean anything. It was to save your life, so don't get the wrong idea," said Ashido. Deku held up his hands, laughing. Whatever you say," said Deku. End of chapter 2. Oh my god, that was a long one. My throat is in pieces. But I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed writing it. And I think this chapter might be better than chapter 1. In my personal opinion. You might disagree. But in my opinion, it's better. A lot more fun. Very dramatic. Tatsumaki turned Nomu into a pile of goo. But yeah, no. Make sure to subscribe and like the video. I love you all.